Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20 plus creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. How many of you have made decisions based on instinct? How many of you have made decisions that seem to fly in the face of all rational thought, yet because you followed your gut, you made the right decision? Is that something that others can tap into? Well, believe it or not, it looks like the most effective marketing campaigns in history, whether they be for a product, a person, or a cause, already know how to tap into your subconscious. Someone who has written the book, quite literally, on instinct and what it means when it comes to business, marketing, relationships, and more, is Leslie Zane. She is an award-winning marketer, a TED speaker, and the foremost authority in harnessing the instinctive mind to accelerate brand and business growth. She's also the author of the new book, The Power of Instinct, The New Rules of Persuasion in Business and Life. Leslie, it's great to talk with you.
It's great to be here, Frank. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Leslie, obviously there's a lot of people that study marketing, that work in marketing. You don't necessarily hear about folks that have a specialization in instinct, and that's your reputation. How does one become an expert in instinct?
You become an expert in instinct by trying everything else and finding that it doesn't work. I mean, if you've ever tried to change somebody's mind, you know how hard that is. But that's what companies and brands and people have been trying to do for 100 years. The traditional approach is trying to persuade the conscious mind to do what it doesn't want to do, and it simply doesn't work. You're coming up against a brick wall. So the power of instinct is the ability to harness the instinctive mind and kind of go around that conscious mind to get people to do what you want, to scale brands, businesses, even to get your partner to take out the garbage.
Well, I want to get to tips on all of those that our listeners can use, but you're so right. As you're speaking, I'm thinking of my days of producing a radio talk show with two hosts that wanted radically different things covered on the show that day, and I would have to persuade each of them that they had come up with the same idea, even though, of course, they hadn't, in order so that we would have some level of harmony. Instinct is one of those words that people use all the time. It's a feeling that I think people have, but maybe it's not something that folks can so easily define. I realize this may sound silly, but what exactly is instinct? What do we mean when we refer to instinct?
Well, if you think of the mind as an iceberg, we have these two mechanisms. And the part above the waterline is the conscious mind, and the part below the waterline is this instinctive, non-conscious, unconscious, subconscious, whatever you want to call it, the part that you can't see. And as it turns out, it is actually this instinctive, unconscious mind that's calling the shots. So we think we're controlling our decisions, but we're really not. We're really rationalizing our decisions that are mainly instinctive after the fact. We're post-rationalizing. So about 95% of the decisions we make every day are actually made on autopilot. And we just think we're controlling our decisions, but we really aren't. So that's really what instinct is. It's that moment of kind of reaching for the brand that's your go-to brand in the supermarket, or, doing certain habits that you just do automatically, driving to that place that you always drive to. Sometimes you say to yourself, I could just do that with my eyes closed. I hope you don't do that. But that's really what we're talking about. You're operating on instinct, but it really is actually much more than a feeling, and I can explain more about that later on.
One of the most interesting TED Talks that I've ever seen is one that you gave about 5 years ago, and it was subheadlined "The Hidden Link Between Success and the Subconscious." And you go into things that would seem completely different from one another, and you explain what Apple, Oprah Winfrey, and winning political candidates all have in common. Now, for people that haven't seen the video, and I definitely encourage people to check it out, what is that? What is that sort of je ne sais quoi that makes all of those brands, even if those brands are people, successful?
Great question. All of those brands are planting a seed in other people's minds, and they're growing that seed into a seedling, into a plant, laying down roots, and little by little growing that little seed into a full-grown tree. So essentially, they're physically growing a brand in other people's minds by making as many connections as possible. So this is like a game of Monopoly. Brands actually have physicality. They're physical things that exist in our minds. A seed, a central node, and then there's a whole bunch of neural pathways that are connected to that with associations. And the associations, in this case, are the water, the sun, the soil. It's the nurturing of how to make the brands grow. So all of those things that all those people and companies that you just mentioned, Apple, Oprah, et cetera, they have these incredibly large brands in people's minds because they've been actively growing them almost like a gardener for decades. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And if people haven't seen that video, it's really helpful in terms of illustrations and animations, and I do recommend it. In fact, I'm going to link to it on my Facebook page. People could check it out. One of the terms that you use that keeps coming up is brand connectome. What is that?
The brand connectome is the cumulative memories that sort of get glued to your brand over time in people's minds, in some cases going as far back as childhood. So if you're Coke or Pepsi or McDonald's, you have a really large brand connectome in people's minds because it's been built up over decades. And you remember maybe your grandmother using it or having it in the household or your mom serving it. Or being taken to McDonald's when you got an A in a test for an ice cream cone. So all of these things get attached to the brand. We don't realize it because they live in our memories. They live in our subconscious. But when you reach for your brand, you're reaching for it because your brand connectome is forcing you to do that. It's completely unconscious. It exists in your subconscious mind. And it is literally telling you will choose that thing. So we don't control our decisions. Our brand connectome does.
At 30 minutes after the hour, you're listening to The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Leslie Zane. She is a brilliant marketer, an expert on the subject of instinct, and the author of the book, The Power of Instinct, The New Rules of Persuasion in Business and in Life. You know, it's funny, as you're talking about the history of different brands, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, whatever it is, and the whole lifetime of memories that come with all these brands, I'm reminded of Tito's Vodka. I don't know if you're a drinker, Leslie, but I've spent more time in bars than I care to admit. And prior to 10 years ago, I had never heard of Tito's Vodka. And then it seemingly came out of nowhere. And I noticed that, to me, seemingly overnight, I would go to bars and people would be ordering Tito's by name, which I had not even heard of 6 months ago. And now I couldn't go to a bar without folks ordering it by name. How do brands do that? How do brands kind of that don't have the long history of a Ford or a Coca-Cola, how do they burst onto the scene and use marketing in an effective way to utilize that brand connectome strategy?
That's a wonderful question. So the super interesting thing is that legacy brands, the really large brands that we've been talking about before, those brands actually are quite vulnerable. And smaller brands, disruptor brands can come in and take a big chunk of market share actually pretty easily because those large brands have some vulnerabilities. Maybe they're talking about one thing, but they have kind of left a gaping hole in some other benefit or some other area. And that kind of creates an opening that another brand can fill. So maybe in the case of Tito's, there's some much larger vodka brand, I don't know, Absolut or any of the others, that left a hole that Tito's was able to come in and fill. Maybe it's the sort of Texan background or its rustic nature or the fact that it kind of looks a little bit crafted. But there are a lot of other associations that it's providing. And then it sort of takes a foothold and starts to create a movement. And then more and more people come. But it's really taking opportunities for where the white space is.
We're talking with Leslie Zane. You could also check out her website, and there's a ton of interesting stuff on there, not only for people that are interested in marketing, but just if people are interested in learning about how the brain works. The website is lesliezane.com. It's Leslie, Leslie. Your book, The Power of Instinct, the subtitle is The New Rules of Persuasion in Business and Life. What are the new rules of persuasion, and how do they differ from the old rules of persuasion?
I love that question because I've essentially been fighting the old rules my entire career. So I started out in marketing in the late 80s, early 90s. And back then, everybody thought that it was the conscious mind that was making decisions. And so we had a bunch of rules that had kind of come up in marketing that we were all trained on. And they were things like, go after your core customer. Your core customer is the key to success, or uniqueness is critical for brand and business growth. Trying to think of another one. Your brand should only stand for one thing. All of those are the conventional rules of marketing that we were raised on. Well, as it turns out, each one of those rules is actually a recipe for shrinking your business. Why is that? Because those rules were created for the conscious mind when we thought it was the conscious mind that was calling the shots. But I can take every single one of those rules, even just the first three that I just mentioned, and I can show you how the mind actually works the opposite way. So let's take uniqueness. The brain doesn't want the things that are unique. We're hardwired to connect with the familiar. That's why during the pandemic, we only reached for the brands that we knew, the brands that made us feel comfortable and secure. It was the brands that we had never heard of that were left over on the shelves. Or think of a baby. If you take a baby out of its mother's arms, it's going to scream because it knows its mother's familiar face. And so as it turns out, uniqueness is actually a recipe for shrinking your brand. What you want to do is leverage the familiar, because that's how the instinctive mind works, and put a distinctive twist on it, a creative twist on the familiar. Then you're riding those familiar neural pathways, but you're making them distinctive to your brand. That's just one example. Another example is the core customer fallacy. The core customer is really a trap. The core customer will never tell you what you need to do to evolve because they're happy with you just the way you are. So really what you need to do to grow is, sure, you need to hold on to your current customers, but if you're not actively reaching out to your growth target, the people you don't have, you're going to have a leaky bucket because the core customer is always leaving. There's churn in every marketing franchise. And so what we want to do is we want to actually find out what the barriers of the growth target are, actively take those down, and bring new users into our franchise all the time. And the list goes on. And the book is basically, the 10 rules that displace the new rules that need to displace those old rules, because those old rules are actually a recipe for reducing your business instead of growing it.
If you're just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. We're talking with Leslie Zane. Using this, I'll call it a power, or maybe a skill is a better term. You talk about how this could be used for positive things, maybe promoting vaccination or maybe even a voter registration drive. But it could also be used for negative things like promoting cigarette addiction, particularly among young people with characters like Joe Camel. How do we know if we're being manipulated by a corporate brand with advertising or with some sort of subliminal messaging? And I don't mean that to sound in a conspiratorial way, but in a way that we might not even realize that we're being marketed to.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Saturday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength, Saturday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Saturday. Saturday, bring it on.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
It's a great question. In the book, I talk about Bernie Madoff because he's a great example of somebody who very much did leverage the hidden brain in a very negative way. But there's positive triggers and there's negative triggers. And we just need to be aware of what triggers are in the first place so that we can be attuned to them and, to your point, know when we're being manipulated. But actually, none of this is subliminal. Everything is out in the open. Back in the 60s and 70s, there was this idea of subliminal advertising where there'd maybe be something tucked into another image, and you couldn't really see it, but maybe you sort of could. That's not exactly what this is. This is really quite overt. But what we're doing is we're just connecting with the things that people already have in their minds. That's really the path of least resistance. Instead of confronting the conscious mind and encountering that brick wall where people are going to be resistant, we want people to buy into our ideas and to listen to to new plans, to new innovations. Like you said in your story about trying to get your 2 producers to agree. The best thing that we can do in order to get people to come along, whether it's a business, a brand, a social movement, a cause, even a presidential candidate, is to leverage what already exists in the mind and not think that we need to introduce foreign things all the time. What we're really doing here is latching on to things that already exist in the mind and then attaching our messages to that so they go down more easily and they can be accepted versus being blocked.
Does what we know about science, specifically brain science, support your thesis on all this?
Oh, big time. So one of the things I talk about in my book is that we're in the age of instinct right now. And what I mean by that is this is the era where we have just this incredibly rich knowledge of the human brain. We're probably still in the primitive stages relative to what we'll learn in the future. But we know a lot more today than we did, even a decade ago. The only reason we have AI today is that the scientists recognized that the human brain is not a sequential machine. It doesn't make decisions step by step like a computer. And that is how they were trying to develop AI for many decades. And it just didn't work because that's actually not how humans think. The way humans think is that they're actually using an analogic model where we're connecting the dots between lots of different things. If I say hamburger, you're going to say McDonald's. Or if I say hot dog, you're going to say mustard. We make associations. So the brain is a connecting the dots machine. It's a dot connecting machine. It's analogic. We make comparisons all the time. That's how the human brain works. That's how AI works. And that's actually how the connectome, the brand connectome works. It's a series of connections, a series of wires that are all connected together that are related to the brand and related to other things in people's minds. And that's why if you want to have a successful brand, you want your brand to touch more things, to connect more dots to other things, other positive things in people's minds. So that's what the brand connectome is. It's a little piece of the human connectome, which is all the wiring that we have in our brains. You can kind of go in there and just pull out those connections, those associations related to your brand. And if you're a brand steward, or if even you're building your own personal brand, which a lot of people are trying to do today, you want to keep that brand connectome healthy and make sure it has lots of positive associations. There's actually 3 rules for having a healthy brand connectome. 1, you want it to be large, so have lots of connections, lots of salience, because then it's that instinctive thing that you think of in a particular situation. So salience and lots of connections, a large physical footprint. 2, you want to have a higher ratio of positive associations versus negative associations. Negative associations hold back growth. And then 3rd, you want some distinctiveness. You want some clarity, a little bit of differentiation. But that's actually not the most important part. The other 2, salience and positive associations, are really more important.
One of the things that I was very curious in learning in your book about was that basically how susceptible we are to marketing is in some respects dependent on how little we know about a product. Apparently, pharmacists, who presumably are better informed about the contents of drugs, are more likely to buy store brands, and professional chefs are more likely to purchase store brand flour. Are the rest of us that are not experts just destined to be dupes?
I don't think so. I think it's a great question, but I don't think so. I actually think that the brands that work really hard to be specialists in their area, they actually know a lot about the products that they make. And they work really hard. They develop a lot of expertise. Some of these brands have gone back 100 years, 200 years. And so I'm a strong believer in brand because I think it actually is a signal that they know what they know what they're doing. They've been around a long time and they're experts in their field.
All right. So now that we know how the brain works, now that we understand the connectome, now that we understand how brains utilize instinct in order to make effective marketing campaigns, How can people listening to this use this in their own lives? Let's talk about at the workplace, for instance. What can we do at work to make sure that we're doing the right things to improve our professional workplace brand?
Well, the first thing to understand is that your brand is made up of lots of different dimensions. There's your expertise. There's your brand image. There's your connection to people and to culture and relationships. The more connections that you have, as I said, the healthier your brand is. So you're going to want to make sure that you keep creating those new connections and keep your brand robust and healthy, and meet a lot of different people in the workplace and create a lot of relationships and make sure lots of people are saying lots of positive things. If you just sit at your desk and do your work all the time, and you stay under a rock, that's probably not the recipe for the greatest success in the workplace. But you also want to be very connected to the company. And I would go out to those social events with your colleagues. There's a lot of different dimensions, and making sure you're kind of hitting on all of those, I think, is going to be really important. It's not just a list of achievements. That's looking at work performance in a very one-dimensional way. But there are tangible dimensions, and then there are these intangible dimensions. And then I think it's really important to get feedback all the time, not just at the time of your performance review, but other times from people that you can trust. Let them tell you what their perceptions are of you, because if there are some negative associations brewing, you're going to want to nip those in the bud. Negative associations are like a virus that can enter your brand connectome and really hold back your personal growth, your business growth. And so it's really important to, get rid of those dead leaves right away. If you're that gardener, take care of your tree and constantly replace negative associations with positive associations. I was at a book signing event the other day, and a young woman came up to me and she said, "Oh, something terrible happened at work. I made a mistake, and I think I should just leave." And I said, "Well, why do you think that?" She said, "Because I just don't think I can recover from it." And I said, I think that's wrong. Of course you can, because the brain is a learning machine. It's constantly receiving new stimuli, and it constantly learns new things. So all you need to do is displace those negative associations with positive ones, and you can move on from this. You're not stuck. None of the associations you have today are permanent. They're ever changing. You just need to make sure you keep adding those positive associations.
And finally, what about relationships? Obviously, a lot of this makes sense from a corporate marketing perspective, even someone that maybe wants to get ahead in the workplace. But if you're looking to get a partner, a husband, a wife, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, what can you do to make sure that you're marketing yourself more effectively in that respect?
Well, I don't know if this is exactly my field, but I would say that if we think of every human being as being a brand, then I think you would want to follow the same kinds of guidelines. You would want to make sure that your image is healthy. You would want to have expertise. You would want to have authenticity. You would want to demonstrate good values. All the different dimensions of a brand, I would imagine, would be the same things that would make you appealing to a potential partner.
Yeah, makes sense. Leslie Zane, congratulations on your work on this and on the book. I hope people check out The Power of Instinct, the new rules of persuasion in business and life. I hope we can chat again soon.
I would love that. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you're welcome to give me a call. Our phone number is 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.